Hey, this is Todd Fox from the Halos in the Infield podcast with obviously your host, Todd Fox, and who's with me right now are my co-host.
Fernando Mendez.
Yes, Fernando Mendez, and we have a special guest from the OC Register, Mr. Jeff Fletcher.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Fine, how are you doing today? And you are now in Minnesota?
I'm sitting here in Target Field. It's about 4 hours before the game, and just enjoying beautiful Minnesota.
Nice.
Okay. What's the weather like over there? Over here in Chicago, for those of you who don't know, I'm in Chicago right now on a business trip. It is hot and muggy. Is it the same thing over there?
It's supposed to be that way over the weekend. Today is very nice. Today is about 80, and it's not really muggy at all. But we got a little overcast going on. But I think over the weekend it's going to be kind of gross. So.
Yeah, I think right now it's like 80 something here, but it's also like 80 something percent humidity. So I'm just kind of like, oh, not that it's that great at home either. SoCal's been the same lately. Super humid, uncharacteristically.
Yeah. Well, now we got the weather out of the way. Let's talk some Angels baseball. You have a question to ask right away, Fernando?
Yeah. So Jeff, I know what your role is as far as being a baseball writer of America, being in charge of the Los Angeles chapter, correct?
I'm the vice chairman this year. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and start off by what that means to you. Let's start off there. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's the BBWA is an important organization, I think, and it's one I've always been proud of being a member of, and I've taken a role in, kind of helping to guide the direction it goes. And it's important, especially now with COVID. There's been a lot of changing rules about how we're allowed to do our jobs, and we sort of have to fight to get back some of the things that we had before the pandemic, and so it's an important thing to do.
Is that part of the fight, trying to get back into the locker rooms, or having a specific time when you're able to have that more person-on-person interview status or the relationship with the players?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get so much more information by being in the clubhouse and talking to players one-on-one than you get on Zooms or even talking to them on the field. So, definitely. And I think fans don't even realize what they've been missing out on all this time. There's lots of information that they're just not finding out because we don't have access to talk to the players. So it's in the interest of the fans, really, that we can get back in there as soon as it works for everybody.
I have been noticing too, like with that being said, I mean, the Zoom calls that they do after these games on the post games, they're sometimes, depending on the outcome of the game, they could be very fast, and they only take maybe one or two questions, and they're very negative to a lot of the questions if they're having a bad game. So yeah, there's not that they could just basically up and leave if they want to, where it seems like where you guys, when you had access, you were right there and you were able to ask them questions and were kind of forced to tell you things, or even if they didn't want to, but and in a bad way for them, but a good way for you to get more information, and also in a good way to establish relationships. You just don't have that right now, right?
Well, I don't think anybody ups and leaves in a Zoom call. I think a lot of times we don't ask very many questions because the people that they give us are not necessarily people that we have a lot of questions for, and we don't want to waste a lot of their time with
That's fair.
asking them a million things. But the clubhouse access is important because you get to have more casual conversations. Forget just the interviews, but you learn stuff about what's going on. Like I'll give you a quick example. Back in May, David Fletcher got a day off. The last day in Houston, they didn't play Fletcher, Trout, or Upton, I believe, all in the same game, and everybody was like up in arms about why they did that. And that was right when we first started being allowed to talk to the players on the field a little bit. And I had talked to David Fletcher a couple days later in Boston, and he told me that he actually had an injury that Joe Madden did not tell us about.
Oh.
And so that explained why he wasn't playing in that game. But if I had not had this chance to talk to David Fletcher individually, I wouldn't have known that. And that's just like a little teeny sliver of the kind of thing that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of stuff that I think us as fans don't even think about or consider because, why would we, right?
Yeah.
At least until now.
You just feel like what you're getting is everything there is to get, but it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would imagine. So tying it back to what you were saying, I know exactly. I know the way you've leaned towards voting, so I don't want to get into that as far as Hall of Fame. Nor are you able to comment about your future voting. But I do want to ask your opinion as a baseball fan about this. Do you ever think that in our lifetimes we will see a known steroid user in the Hall of Fame? Now that's just me asking, Jeff Fletcher, the fan.
Well, that depends on what your definition of a known steroid user is. I think there's some widely assumed steroid users that are already in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a slippery slope to me. I think that there's already steroid users in the Hall of Fame, I'm sure. So to me, I vote for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and those guys. And I would like to see him get in, but I understand why people don't vote for him. It's a tough question. There's not really right answers. There's good points on both sides.
I totally agree. For what it's worth, I agree with your viewpoints and I agree with your decision, but that's just me. I as of right now, clearly we're in the minority.
Well, actually, not necessarily the minority, but you got to have 75%. And I think right now Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens get like 60%. So it's the majority, but it's not enough of a majority to get them in the Hall of Fame.
Fair enough.
Do you think as the older hats that have been voting for a long time either retire or go away from or don't have their vote anymore for whatever reason, do you think the younger ones that get the opportunity, the younger beat writers that have the opportunity to vote, will make the change to finally get them over that 75%?
We might not have enough time.
Yeah, it's not going to be enough time. I think this is their last year. This year. So I think gradually their numbers have gone up.
Uh-huh.
And, if they could be on the ballot forever, that might happen. But I don't think they got enough time to make it on this next year.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I've been watching that as a fan the last couple of years. And I was kind of projecting, well, maybe, this year would have been the year. And the projections, maybe it would have been the year, but, obviously it just wasn't the case. So another question I have for you, Jeff, if I were to ask a childhood Jeff Fletcher who his favorite baseball player was, who would he have told me?
Boy, that depends what age I was. But one of my first favorite players I remember was Steve Garvey when I was really young. I was like 8, 9 years old. And then I became a Mariners fan, oddly enough, even though I grew up in Ohio. But I wasn't really that close to any. I was kind of far from Cleveland and Cincinnati, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And when I was 9 years old, I thought the Mariners had cool uniforms. So I started being a Mariners fan. And Harold Reynolds was one of my favorites at that point. And then Ken Griffey Jr. became a favorite, but he and I are actually the same age. So it was, when I was 19 or 20, he was just reaching the big leagues at 19 or 20. So he was probably my last favorite baseball player before I started doing this.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I'm at an awkward stage right now. I'm 26. So I'm at an awkward stage where I'm like now starting to call these guys kids. And I'm like, oh, come on. We draft someone and I go to like a minor league game and I'm like, older than some of these guys. It's a strange age for me. So I could imagine what that was like.
Yeah, it was, I remember Omar Vizquel was the last guy to play in the big leagues who was older than me. And so then once he was gone, I was like, oh, wow, I guess I'm never going to make it now. I guess I'm too old now.
Oh, I wonder, maybe I have to do the math on that. I mean, obviously we're still a little bit away, but as time goes on, maybe I'll have to see, man, who's it going to be? Okay. So in your time covering the Angels, Giants, and the Athletics, who's a prospect who you personally saw grow in any of those organizations that you thought was like a cannot miss guy who just never put it together? Is there anybody that comes to your mind?
Oh, there's tons of them. Well, I remember, let's take back to the beginning, Ben Grieve with the A's.
Oh, yeah.
He came up and he actually was really good to start his career, but then his career just kind of flamed out. And I mean, he was like a top prospect and reached the big leagues. Things would look pretty good, and it didn't happen for him. And, there are a lot of guys like that. It's the other way around. It's the exception. When a guy looks like he's a great prospect and actually becomes a great player, that's the more rare thing. But it's just so hard to really convert on your talent and not just make the big leagues, but stay and have a real long career. It's really hard to do.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember the Mike Trout days where people just thought like, oh, he'll probably be, an average major leaguer. I mean, we never really knew what Mike Trout was actually going to do.
Yeah, I think because as Angels fans, we kind of saw like the Dallas McPhersons and the Brandon Woods, and so we're kind of skeptical when people were like, "Oh, Trout's going to be the next big thing." It's like, oh, we kind of heard this before, but we're glad it worked out the way it did.
And remember, I grew up in San Diego, so I mean, I remember the 2000s Padres where it was like, oh, Luis Dorrego, Sean Burrows, these guys are going to come up and be great, and that was what I heard through the media. My dad listened to Mighty 1090 all the time, so I was hearing all that kind of stuff. So I was just used to prospects coming up and not doing well. So as an Angels fan, it's almost been the same thing for the last couple of years. Is there anybody that comes to mind with the Angels who you really thought was going to do well, who didn't? Maybe besides like Caleb Coward?
I mean, I probably
it's always good when you stump a beat writer.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't had really great prospects lately that you thought were going to be really good. I guess Griffin Canning, was a guy that I thought was going to be really good, even up until the beginning of this year. I thought he really made a lot of progress last year, and this year he could really take the next step. And I had a scout in spring training to me told me that he thought Griffin Canning was just kind of like a poor man's Trevor Bauer. They had a lot of similarities. And if you look at really like their numbers when they first came to the big leagues, they're pretty similar too. But obviously Griffin Canning has not had a good year, and now he's back in AAA. So he's got some work to do to get back on that track. But he's a guy that definitely has not quite lived up to the expectations. And obviously Joe Adell, but I think it's still a little too soon to give up on Joe Adell.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
But Canning has now had, 2.5 seasons in the big leagues and still kind of trying to find himself.
And one quick follow-up question to that. What's your thoughts or overall thoughts on Andrew Heaney, tonight's pitcher? I mean, like, what because we've
facial expression.
Yeah, we've had this conversation real quick with a lot of the fans, and he, to me, and to a lot of the other fans, has been one of the most frustrating pitchers to watch over the last few years.
I think if you take all of his innings that he pitches, probably he looks like a really good pitcher in 90% of the innings he pitches. But that other 10% ruins it, I think, is the problem. And they said so many games where he's like giving up 1 run through 5 innings, and then he gives up 3 runs in the 6th, and he ends up with 5 2/3, 4 runs, and it's not a good game. Or he gives up 3 runs in the 1st, and then he doesn't give up any more runs. He's just had so many games like that, and those are his bad games. And then he'll have the good games where he actually does go 6 or 7 innings and he's good, but he just doesn't have the consistency really that you think he should. And he's far enough into his career now that I don't know that he really that he's going to like take a step in any direction. I think this is probably what he is. But he's definitely got a lot of talent. He's got a lot of potential, or he thought he did. But he's very frustrating in the fact that he's so good for most of the time, and then just has these little hiccups that they kind of spoil the rest of it.
Yeah, I think for him, it's always just been that one big inning. You know what I mean? Whatever that particular inning is, it's always been, like you said, first inning, really rough outing, and then he's going to be shut out the next 5-6 innings. But actually, I think that was spot on. That was a very good answer. We appreciate that answer. So aside from some of the obvious things this year that have come as surprises to others, Shohei Ohtani, that kind of stuff, what are some of the biggest surprises about this year's Angels team that, have kind of caught you off guard?
I'm going to just say probably they're putting the tarp out right now. Jose Suarez is a guy that I think had never really looked in his previous big league appearances in 2019 and 2020 like he was going to be a very successful big leaguer. And he was obviously very young, so you knew there was a lot of time for him. But he's really taken a big step this year. And I think that's certainly one of the most encouraging things that's happened for them.
Do you think that Suarez and Sandoval are going to be fixtures in the Angels rotation for the foreseeable future?
Fixtures is a pretty strong word. I think they're high up on the depth chart. And, if the season ended today and they were starting to talk about next winter's rotation, you would probably say, all right, you're going to have Ohtani, Sandoval, Suarez, and Cannon, and then see if you can add 2 from out of the organization. That's probably the way you would do it.
And speaking of pitching, obviously with what Perry did, the 20 for 20, and then, obviously he's been talking about stretching out Rodriguez as a starter, and Detmers is knocking on the door to come up here. Do you think this is going to be a younger staff next year, like with what you said with Sandoval, Ohtani, and Suarez? Would it be one of those off seasons to where maybe if they don't land an ace again, they can depend on this young pitching?
I mean, they're going to have to. I mean, this is something that I've told Angels fans for years. Nobody wants to seem to listen to me. The way you have a good pitching staff is by developing a lot of good pitchers. Mm-hmm. You don't go and buy one big shiny thing and put them at the top and all of a sudden have a good pitching staff. I mean, the New York Mets have had Jacob deGrom, and their postseason success has been about the same as the Angels, really.
Yeah.
They're kind of a disappointment every year.
Very similar.
The New York Yankees right now are not doing a whole lot better than the Angels are, and they have Garrett Cole. Yep. The Philadelphia Phillies have Aaron Nola, who any Angels fan would go, that's the perfect ace that we need, and where are the Phillies right now?
Yeah.
So what you need is you need to have 12 or 13 good pitchers. And the way that happens is by developing them. So when the Angels are good again, it's not going to be because of what they did in the winter. It's going to be because all of a sudden, Canning figured it out, Sandoval figured it out, Reed Detmers figured it out. You have like 3, those are like 3 of your top 4 starters, and then maybe somebody else. And that's how the Angels are going to be good again. It's not going to be an off-season shopping spree that is going to take them from bad to good. It's going to be improving the guys they already have, and then maybe putting the cherry on top with somebody you get from outside. That's the way it works. And I think a lot of people just can't get their mind around that. And they think that you can just go on Amazon over the winter and say, hey, I need good pitching. Yeah. Put this in my cart and there we go,
Yeah, I think it's spot on, because like the White Sox, a lot of people thought that, it was just an off season that they did where they were able to change things around. It's like, no, they've been building for a while, and they just added some pieces to make themselves better. So, yeah, I think Angels fans, they think with the Pujols money off the table and all this other stuff, they're just able to just, like you said, go to Amazon and get whoever they want and change the complexity of the team. But, yeah, you're right. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you need a lot of good pitchers, not just one.
Exactly.
I agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I know you got to run, so just a couple more questions for you. So you've been covering the Angels since 2013, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you've seen 3 different managers in your time here, and that's obviously Joe Maddon, Brad Ausmus, and Mike Scioscia. What is something? What's a good quality you've seen in all 3 that have fit their particular team?
Well, they all bring different things. I think that Scioscia had a really good way with the players. I think that the players enjoyed being around him. He kind of kept people loose. I think Maddon is kind of the same. He's very supportive. No matter how bad things seem to be outwardly, he kind of stays optimistic. And, I think the players need that. I know fans sometimes get upset because they want to hear the manager like throw all his players under the bus and say, these guys stink, but that's not how you manage people. That's not, I don't think you would want your boss to do that. So I don't know why people think it would be a good quality if the manager of their baseball team did that. So those are for those 2 guys. And Brad Ausmus, I think, was just a really smart, analytical guy. We didn't really get very much chance to see much of the other stuff that he could bring to the table. But and he also went through, Tyler Skaggs dying, which is a tough situation for any manager to have. So I think it's really unfair to judge anything about his managerial tenure.
Yeah. Do you think that was more about Joe Maddon being available than it was about Brad Ausmus?
Yeah, I think so. I think that if Joe Maddon were not all of a sudden available, that they would have kept Brad Ausmus.
Okay. And real quick, my last question would be your thoughts between Epler and what you've seen with Perry so far, like their differences in the GM styles and how they work things.
Well, Perry's is pretty open about what they're doing. and I think they both kind of have some similar philosophies. I think they've been in a tough spot, both of them. There's another thing I've tried to explain to people is that the Angels kind of got in an unfortunate storm of events by having Mike Trout become not just a very good player to where he was like like the Marlins could trade Miguel Cabrera because he was just a good player. The Angels could not trade Mike Trout because he was a generational player.
Yep.
And when Mike Trout made that crossover from being just, a very good young player to a generational young player, the farm system all of a sudden got to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So what that meant is that the Angels couldn't really trade away their major league players to improve the farm system because then you're just tanking while you have Mike Trout. And you can't trade away your farm system to get good major league players because you don't have anybody in the farm system. Mm-hmm. So I think both Epler and Manassian were kind of stuck to where they didn't really have good avenues for improving the team because of that circumstance. So it's hard to judge either of them. I think that certainly Manassian has not been around long enough to really judge his moves. And Epler, I think, made a lot of good moves that people don't want to remember. But, I think they both are pretty smart guys and knew what they had to do.
Okay.
Yeah, Billy Epler was really good about picking people up from the waiver wire. I understand there's a little bit of chance to that, but I mean, Brian Goodwin, J.C. Ramirez, Parker Bridwell, Blake Parker, these are all guys, Hansel Robles, that, came up, were impact players who people probably didn't think were going to do much. I mean, we had a chance to have Kirby Yates. We had him for literally a game.
Yeah. And, Max Stassi and Patrick Sandoval were guys that he picked up in trades for sending away rentals, basically. That there were guys that they had no more use for. And those two pretty good players they got back for those guys.
That's true.
And Ty Buttrey, for his short time.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the last questions I have for you. So Joe Adell, Brandon Marsh, Reed Detmers, Jordan Adams, Jeremiah Jackson, and Kyron Paris are, the top prospects that we have. Obviously, Joe Adell isn't officially a prospect anymore, but what are the odds that all those guys are still in the organization after August 1st?
I'm going to say they probably all are, because I think that I don't know that really the players are going to be available to them to make a trade that would involve one of those guys, because there's really not very many like controllable, really good players that are even out there. I mean, you talk about, Jose Barrios and Germán Marquez, and that's like two guys. So and the teams that are contending this year are going to have much more motivation to get those guys because they can use them for the 2021 pennant race and the 22 pennant race, whereas the Angels are most likely looking at them for just the 22 pennant race. So are you going to want to give up a guy like that for really a one season shot with one of these guys? So I'm going to say they're probably not going to have a deal out there. I mean, they're going to be open to it if they can find it to get in a controllable guy, but I just don't think there's enough of them out there to where they would to be motivated to trade one of those players for that kind of return.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll see, right? Not very many days left. All right. So closing question I have for you. Once again, this is Jeff Fletcher, the Orange County Register, joining us, generous enough with his time. In your opinion, as we currently sit during this conversation, who is the best player in Major League Baseball?
Depends on your definition of best player.
Most talented player. Let's say that.
I still think that, let's put it this way. If all the players became free agents and you could start your team and pick anybody, I still think you would take Mike Trout. I think he's the most sure thing, not going to have a bad year, still young. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer already, He never has a bad year. Unlike, the other guys that come in and out of the conversation, Mookie Betts, Christian Yelich, those kind of guys, they have bad years. Mike Trout does not have a bad year. As for Ohtani's definitely a special guy and he's a unique guy, but this is really only the only year he's done it.
Yeah.
And it's only been for 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really put him in that category to where you say, oh, he's going to keep doing this again for years. It'd be great if he could, but it's still a little early to say that.
Okay, but if we are doing a fantasy draft like that MLB The Show, is Jacob deGrom the first pitcher to go?
First pitcher, yeah, probably. He's the best pitcher in baseball.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. Yeah, it's typically, I think, the general consensus for most fans. It's Mike Trout and, Jacob deGrom. So
sounds good.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for your time. We appreciate it. We hope to stay in contact with you, and we hope you enjoy your time in Minnesota. Todd, do you have anything to say for Jeff?
No, just thank you again for your time. And I know this is a busy time for you during the season now, getting up to the trade deadline, everything to report on. Just continue success.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.